So we're just an excellent. Great. We never got it. And then also some really it's kind of hard to use. I mean, it will right, but then and how the organization is. And some of the average
I'm also an updated version of this presentation. Oh, okay. So you're so we can do that when we get there. Yeah. Get it ready now. I guess we can do it when we get there. That's unfortunate. I actually said okay. Okay. It's just gonna be.
And then this what's that? I mean, it was. I I'm sorry. Did they do the things and stuff? They did the things. So I think there's also no traction. It was weird. There was some other really cool things to crash by through. Yeah, I was kind of wild.
All right. Should I screen share for Google Talk? I think I already did that. I think we're already in the screen share.
Yeah,
Do you want to do that before we start class? Yeah, whatever you want to do. He may not be able to join right at the outset. Once you go right ahead, I just want to. Can you chat with him from your device?
I can.
Okay, I want you to do that. Hey!
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic.
So we watched there
All day long?
That's well the first hour.
We've had months of our life.
Oh, okay, well, another chance to do it.
Yeah.
All right, why don't we get started? Okay. Welcome back after an all too brief holiday break. It was a holiday. Did it feel like a holiday? No. Okay, can we close the door back there? Would you mind, Joel? Thanks. All right, so as promised, the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics has created design briefs for us, project design briefs for the 5 areas that will be our final projects, and they will help us figure out who you're going to be talking to in this user-centered design elements and what the parameters of those projects are going to be. I have copies of them. One page turned out blank. We're also going to email this to you, but here, let's hand them out. Yes, this is about. So we're setting up the final groups today, and that's a change from the syllabus, which had us sort of going in to interview the neighborhood to figure out what projects they wanted, and the mayor's office very kindly did that for us. So we've got that structure. Your task for the 28th is the user-centered design task, to figure out what questions you want to ask of what kinds of people. So when you have those ideas, email them to me and to Kate. Have your groups email them together by 4 p.m. on the 27th. I'll repeat this at the end of the class, but I just want to say what we're up to. Yes, Pat?
Is there any way that we will rank those choices, or is it random?
You're going to be randomly assigned. Here's the thing, though. If you're unhappy with your group, go find someone in the group you want to be in and persuade them to move. And then let Kate know where you've gone. No, I know, it's about the topic. No, if you're unhappy with the topic, find somebody in the topic, in another topic where you want to go and persuade them. Maybe I should be less rigid. Okay, should we do, the matching process, I suddenly worried they were going to set up some like medical residency matching, but if this is easy to do, we'll do it. We were going to do it ourselves. All right, show of hands, how many people want Kate and I to just set up the groups and then take it from there? How many of you want us to do that? Like 4 or 5. All right, how many people want to express preferences and then have us take them into account? More people. More people. Okay, Kate, over to you.
I will make a spreadsheet.
Kate, make a spreadsheet. Okay.
I know one thing about these
Yes.
design briefs. So as you guys are figuring out what it is you would want to do, the most important section of these is the what-if statement, and to a lesser degree the objective. But the what-if sort of sets out the aspiration for what each of these sort of efforts are trying to actually achieve. The requirements is a bit strong of a word, so if you're put off by any of the requirements, don't worry that much about it. But if you're captivated by the what-if, then that's the group for you.
Excellent. So Kate's somehow going to do this during class, because we want to get this moving so that next week when we're at MIT, you will have already felt yourself to be part of your group and be, thinking about what questions you want to ask people in the neighborhood. All right? So we'll set up a spreadsheet during class.
During class, if you can do your best to respond by midnight this evening, then we can have something more formal for tomorrow.
Okay. Right. So you don't have to say on the spot what your preferences are, but let's get it in by midnight tonight. All right. Very exciting developments at the iLab. We have space, thanks to Kate. And Kate is going to describe to us what this all means.
Well, thanks to a team of people who applied from this class to have space there. So I think what it is, and we need to get, I'll get more details this week, but basically the iLab put out solicitations from all the schools
in Chicago.
Students who were part of an entrepreneurial group and wanted some space in their new facility on a more permanent basis to meet, collaborate, an opportunity to engage with the experts and residents there, and the sort of workshops that they do and all of that. So I applied for our class, and we got it, which is good. So what I think that means is that we have readily available space over in that building. How many people have actually been over there? Raise your hand. So somebody who's been, can you just describe it for the other folks? Yeah.
It's awesome.
Right.
No.
It's because some bigger spaces, some smaller spaces with kind of like forum-esque in the sense it's designed for people to come together and collaborate in a lot of different ways. They have a lot of flat screen TVs. They have whiteboards that take up the whole wall to write on. It's not anything really unique. It's mostly about the space, but the way it brings people together is pretty interesting.
So, yeah, that's a great description. It's as close to what Harvard has of MIT Media Lab, I think, is the way to describe it. And the goal is to think of it for you guys as space to brainstorm, space to collaborate, space to meet from an educational perspective. But, and I'll find out more details. I'm not going to promise anything now, but wouldn't it be cool if we could, host our stakeholder partners together at this space, like for some sort of, events or focus groups or, whatever it ends up being. Basically, I'll have more information. So space over there.
We have space, and this is a Harvard-wide thing where there's just tremendous excitement about this thing. So we could also have a field trip in addition to the taking space to make sure that everybody in the class gets a sense of what this place is like. So we'll schedule that. But in addition, it's just going to be great for the teams to have a place to go. There's such a premium on space. Okay, so that's like thrilling, I have to say. And for the Kennedy School to choose us is great. So, cool. More stuff. Ben Scott is coming, Rye, inspirational fellow, speaking at 3 o'clock on Friday, and probably in the Allison dining room. Oh, no, Kate, we're going to part of my role. Oh, dear. Okay. Do you have, And he will be inspiring us. Really, this is the launch of the initiative, the agenda, the overall Tech HKS initiative. And Ben will be here to help us, telling some case studies of changing lives using technology that the State Department has carried out. And he's really been at the heart of that. And he's a terrific character, so I hope you all can come. I'll certainly be there. We're meeting next week in the Media Lab at 4:30. Pizza will arrive at 6:30, so you actually have to stay through the class for the pizza, but I know you can do that. And lots of people will be joining us from all across the Media Lab, professors and students. And the idea for this is that at that class, the groups will be presenting about the project design briefs and the questions they'd like to ask, and we're hoping to suck in the Media Lab students by having their interests suddenly emerge and align exactly with what we want to do in these projects. Okay, so that's next week, and then another visitor, Alec Ross, also from the State Department, who's going to come talk about what skills are important in today's civil service, and particularly digital technology awareness and sort of aptitude. So that's going to be good. That's later, it's in April. Okay, from last week, I wanted to, again, give some feedback on what happened last week. You remember Group 1, Matching Community Skills with School Needs. Great to see the model of B2B.net. Always a good idea to think about platforms that can be repurposed and used. And this notion of setting up a facilitating portal that allows the best ideas and the best people to be found who aren't necessarily inside the government or inside a particular firm, but outside. It's very valuable. Some challenges in sort of continually updating a database, but the big pluses of a platform like that is it could be really usable and scalable and sustainable. I can imagine that idea really taking hold and being very valuable, as it has been, obviously, in Brazil for lining up volunteers with the projects they're going to carry out. So that was pretty interesting. Just want to remind us all of that. Group 2, this was another platform idea, the Charter School Community Plan based on Change by Us NYC. Lots of positives here. Great that the group took into account how the platform would be governed and how it would attract ideas. Some questions from Nigel and others about the challenges here. Would this be persistent enough as a platform to actually allow for tracking projects and finding out whether they really worked? But as an idea, a good step, and also great to be reusing Change by Us. Group 3, this was this very crisp presentation, and some very big positives here included the importance of communicating a vision of why this platform existed, what goals it was trying to reach, and targets and outcomes, and really measurable, visualizable outcomes presented on a digital platform is very, very valuable. A sort of a reuse approach that, again, this time the Gates Foundation approach. A challenge here expressed by Nigel and by me is that government and organizations are not always the best actors at building websites. And if you optimize on building a website rather than thinking about what kinds of data you're going to unleash or how you're going to find ways to engage with people and get them to participate, you may be directing resources towards a beautiful design that then doesn't end up living beyond its first iteration. But it was beautiful, and so we're glad to see that. Group 4, this was truly exciting. I thought this visually arresting dashboard. Do you guys remember this? And see, you remember because it was this very large presentation of different modules that would be present on a dashboard, huge variety of possible metrics, and visible in the school and outside the school. That was exciting. High production value in that single drawing of the dashboard. I love that. There were lots of challenges here. How sustainable, again, is always the question. Who's going to keep it going? And Nigel raised the point about there be arguments over what metrics to show and who would allow them. But even having that argument would reveal tensions and possibilities in the neighborhood. So that was Group 4, the Dudley School dashboard. And I bet the dashboard idea will come back to us in other ones of these projects. And then Group 5, these are two elements here, the e-newsletter and Connect Dudley. good idea of having interactive, updated information sources. There was some feedback that SMS updating of parents about schools might not be a beloved use of technology. Again, high production value in the presentation, which I value, and lots of good ideas expressed in this presentation, lots of different elements that might be present in the newsletter, and ways of connecting parents using texting, which we do think is something that most of the neighborhood people have. So just a swift overview of last week, reminding us all how much we're learning quickly. On the innovation presentations, just a reminders here that you have some particular tasks with them, what problem you're trying to solve, why is this interesting, why does it work, and the goal here, the game plan, is to have you really try to do this Ignite style thing. And it's hard. You won't necessarily treasure doing this, but it's a good discipline to speak to a slide that's going to move ahead. You don't have very much time, and you have to be really crisp about what it is you're trying to put across. You want to say a word about Ignite?
You can lose an audience very quickly making it interesting.
Oh, right.
Practice.
You have to practice. You cannot do this for the first time in the class. You have to do it over. You have to actually embarrass yourself and record yourself. And be able to do it without reading, without looking, just having, and if you can dare yourself to actually push the slides to move, this is one of those skills that really works. We're smiling knowingly because this is hard. We're not saying it's easy. But that's another element of what's going on with this innovation style thing. All right. So the project for today, for which you only had to confront your inner demons and not do any group work, was one way of improving the Citizens Connect process, and an idea for future government services for Dudley that maybe springs from Citizens Connect. And we asked you to look at not only the mobile version of Citizens Connect, but also the text-based version and the web-based version. And so we're looking forward to hear what you guys had to say. So let's start with the first question first. One way of improving it. Should I do cold calls? I'm very good at that. Catherine, some way of improving this, the Citizens Connect.
Sure. So Caroline and I used the mobile version, and I also played with the website version. One of the things that I felt was that, particularly I think in the website version, you realize Citizens Connect is evidence of the darker side of Boston. So it's evidence of graffiti and vandalism and crime and unneighborly behavior. So a slightly different way of answering the question is actually, how do you use Citizens Connect to represent the best of Boston? So my thought was, rather than totally transforming the app into something completely different, actually using or creating one day or an event in the course of the year that represents the best of Boston. So one idea was actually taking advantage of Earth Day, which is in late April, and adding perhaps a feature, an element to Citizens Connect where folks can download the app and then actually document a positive contribution that they're making to the community. So erasing graffiti or painting a mural or cleaning up trash like we saw them do in the Dudley neighborhood. And part of that sort of focus on one day and event focus is to actually to answer the second part of the question, which is to get neighborhoods like Dudley and folks that perhaps haven't used Citizens Connect downloading the app, using it for a positive purpose, and then ultimately the hope would be that they would also take advantage of it for all of the other sort of documentation purposes of potholes and graffiti and stuff.
And how visually would you capture that day? How would you do that? What do you think, Lila?
There was an international one that was really, it was part of 360, or 360 maybe it was called, where people all around the world, it was actually a global warming protest, but they sent in, that's the different one. There's one where all around the world people turn off lights at the same time, but then there was one where they sent in photos of citizen organized protests, and it was all one screen. You could go to the site, and a lot of media stories came off of that from this one site of all these pictures from all around the world coming in. So it was really nice. I think it could easily be translated. It was probably easier to make it smaller. It was suitable.
Yeah. What about okay, so we've got this nice kernel of idea with the positive spin on Boston. As you approach Citizens Connect, how about its usability? And that's always a question for an app. So comments on that, usability. Yeah, Luis.
I mean, I think the app's great. but for example, we as the university student now want to get raw data or generate visualizations or something, just to see what are the places that have, you know, most incidents, if there are any possible trends. I noticed that, you know, the addresses are pretty evident, so you can create something, you pull out some data. I mean, I tried even to do a couple of it, but, you know, still, there isn't, for example, even a map just showing all dots.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
it's very hidden, but it's not easy to download data or to play around with it. You know, this is, so I would think it would be more accessible.
Elizabeth had her hand up. And usability?
I use the iPhone app, and I found it very usable and very sort of intuitive to use. So I wouldn't really recommend all that much, but that's concerned. Sort of my feeling as a user was, well, this is nice. You know, I just did some like trash and some graffitis, and I wondered, you know, what does this mean overall though? I saw sort of like what 20 people before me had posted and what I was doing, and I sort of reconnecting to this dashboard idea.
Right.
My feeling was, wouldn't it be cool if I could sort of see for the past year how many reports had come in, how quickly the city had responded to them, sort of having, and just getting a sense of, you know, how much is this actually helping, and maybe even having Citizens Connect sort of set some benchmarks, or you know, they want to be able to respond to things people upload within so many days, and then tracking on whether you can achieve that.
And how quickly these get resolved? Will,
yeah, a couple of things related to the map specifically. Is it GPS enabled?
If your phone is.
Okay, so it wasn't working for me, so just default into the GPS, so your location. And then also tapping to drop
What kind of
a
phone
point.
do you have?
What?
What kind of phone do you have?
Droid Galaxy S.
Yep.
And then tapping to drop a point rather than dragging. So for me, it was a button you have to like zoom out and like pull and drag over and let it go rather than just tap.
Oh, okay. Heard that before.
Yeah, if the GPS doesn't work, which is tough on some phones, then you have to drag it.
Right. So I saw Hannah had her hand one time ago.
Yeah, I sort of adding up to what Louise and Elizabeth said. I was trying to search around tweets and reasons to figure out what was going on in my area, and I found that to be difficult. And if it was streamlined somehow, I could search and things come up, and also just to be able to see how people are using this. Like, I was right around South Station, and before I clicked on the app, I was thinking, oh, this is a really central part of town. There's probably a lot of reports that have already gone in. So I would have liked to see trends like that and to have been able to search tweets and reasons simultaneously. And I'm also wondering if you report something, you know, because it's map, because it's GPS oriented, if you report something and it is exact spot that's already been reported, is there something to tell you it's already been done?
No.
No.
No, we wanted to have that magic.
I would just to stick on we're going to go back to feedback, but usability of the who used the text version or another version. Sounds like the iPhone app is like glowing and beautiful. You have problems with Droid? Helena?
I use the iPhone app, but I thought there were still some things about usability that might be better. The first thing I thought when I downloaded it was there wasn't any instructions about what it was for. Like, if I hadn't seen this class, I think I would have been a little confused. And so I wasn't, and I remembered from class that a lot of it was about graffiti and potholes. So then I stood there and thought to myself, what kind of things can I report on here? And then I went, and the way I tried to figure it out was I went to recents and I saw the categories that other people reported. I was like, oh, I guess we're all doing graffiti and potholes. And I noticed that over 50% of the reports were in the other category. So maybe that's intentional in that you don't want to limit people in terms of what kinds of things they can try to report. I remember the story about the right? But so that's great, but at the same time, I would have liked to have seen what was going on in that other category. I don't know if there's a way to make that those codes, those themes pop out or something. So yeah, there's sort of like
Some kind of emergent text on it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Other
I'm
categories.
curious about how people figure out what it's for.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Usability. So yeah.
I've assumed some might have been a political reason that the word when a report is completed is closed, not completed. But
I do think the app looked like it was attempting to not necessarily hide, but sort of obfuscate around what was new and what wasn't, because everything was white. And I thought it might just be nice to be transparent and have red for stuff that was reported and green for stuff that was closed, like as the backdrop colour, so that you could see. And when I actually went through, it wasn't a bad ratio, so I don't think it would look that bad. And you might, maybe I thought perhaps it was a problem that you'd have a green for something that hadn't been completed. And then just a minor point on closed, and it's probably hard for you to control against who's writing the sort of closed summary. But maybe 10% of the stuff used a lot of jargon. Like they'd say DRC jurisdiction transferred, or something graffiti has had cabinet control clean. I'm like, what the hell is a cabinet control? How about just graffiti gone?
Right. That's good. Let's stick on, okay, Khalil, following up? Yeah.
I love colors, and I like yellow as a great person. Say that it's either open or closed. It might be something that's long term. I see a lot of potholes, stuff that's long term. And yellow says, look, we got it. We have someone working on it. We're not finished with it yet, but we are. It is in our queue as opposed to nothing's happening.
Yeah.
So I want to add to that, because I thought it's one more thing about having some spotlight mechanism, but I also thought about it might be useful to have it on the other side as well. Because I find myself finding things and wanting to prioritize. And like, this is something that I would like to take care of right now versus later, and maybe some simple way to indicate that, and then if multiple indicate the same, then they all indicate red, that it gets taken care of earlier.
Yeah. Any questions? This is a good answer.
So we've shied away from prioritization, largely because we don't want to. We basically want our completion, our work, to be driven by what's most efficient for the work crews in the most equitable way across the city, and so not to skew what actually is done by where people are most favored. That said, we've definitely played around with that concept and wondered what is the right way of doing that without basically having somebody's new tree request skyrocket to the top of the list because 10 people in that area all got around and said, I want a tree here, and
On balance, yeah. That actually leads straight to one of the questions I had about using the app, is that it wasn't clear that I could use it to request things. Like if I was walking down a bike path that was really dark because of the categories, like I would think like, oh, this could be great for lights and not have it. One thing that I loved was that I got an email like 30 seconds after I did put a report on, and the email said the same thing that I just reported basically, but I thought that was effective in terms of like, oh hey, we're paying attention. And that did have someone said before they didn't know the times, but mine said all signs are repaired within 2 weeks, public safety signs are repaired within 48 hours. Which I don't know if that's actually true, but it
made you feel better.
Yeah. When you hit tweet though on the Droid one, it goes to the developer's Twitter feed, and there's only one tweet, and that was very confusing.
Okay, so how about the feedback? All right, so that's from the front end, from your perspective, and then we had a couple comments here about needing to see some visualization of what's happening, or the things you're getting fixed, maybe not just in your neighborhood, but across the whole city. Let's think about feedback loops that might have been useful to you in this application. So yes.
Well, maybe we addressed it earlier, but allowing someone to sort of second a vote, and maybe graphically that would look like a bigger transparent bubble around the actual pin on the map to show that there was more interest. And that could be a way that people who were interested in the thing pothole getting fixed was here, but it actually was fixed. And then, importantly, a mechanism, I don't know if there is one, for saying, yes, this was done properly, the city did a great job, and I really enjoyed it, or I really appreciated it, or, you know, the city took 7 days to get it. Some sort of response.
That would be visible for everybody. It could become that a heckler, you know, all these words, a place for people to just dump on the city.
But I think the whole app has the potential for that, and the beauty of it is that it's just so open that the city will deal with it. And
city has thick skin. They don't need they don't care for being Tyler, do you have any comments on this?
Where to begin? I've had a lot of the same
Okay.
kind of comments with people, but one thing I noticed, when I'm feedback question, but
Yeah.
in my neighborhood, which is sort of near Dudley, I was the only two posts, for a couple miles around, and they all seem to be only in downtown. And I don't know, I'd never heard of that before this class either, but there's a lot of graffiti down there, and it's kind of interesting. There was nobody using it.
That's really important.
My idea solves a problem that I'm not sure you guys actually have, so kudos, it's helpful. But I thought one way to encourage people to post more, so perhaps you guys already have way more than you can deal with, and so this is a bad idea. But if you log, I'm a runner, and if you log running online with Nike, they have kind of different levels, and they'll change your color, and it really encourages you to run harder to get to the next level. Something you could have some sort of almost status for people who have contributed. Because I remember when you guys first presented it, you said part of the beauty of this is people no longer feel like they're complaining, they feel like they're helping fix the city. And so if after you submit, it's like, hey, you helped us clear 12 potholes. I'm like, yeah, go me, I'm going to look for another one.
Right.
And so maybe that's going to, just add to the problem of having too much, but it might be a way to encourage people.
Great. Yeah.
I have an idea that's actually related to that in terms of, I was also looking at the entire map and trying to figure out, I don't know what particular initiatives you all have made to promote it. I remember you mentioned at one point that there were some bus ads and things like that, but one way to possibly do this is to form some partnerships with businesses. And this is obviously more of a, it's more human resource intensive, but it would be one method is to build some partnerships with businesses with kind of also in their interest to have neighborhoods beautified. So maybe if I live in the Dudley neighborhood and I report X number of incidents, then some cafe or something or the local restaurant will give me a 5% discount or $3 off my next lunch. That would be one way to do it. And another thought, I don't know if this is necessarily an interest for most people that use the app, but for us, it seems like a lot of people want to see the progress in terms of time. So maybe one idea, I love being able to see both the list view and the time and the map view, and one idea is to add a timeline. It could be neighborhood specific or entire city specific, but that would be
Trying to resolve. Okay. Yeah, Tyler, again.
I think one thing that, I don't know how sensitive it could be or how it would work, but rather than just people getting points for reporting, if there are certain types of trash cleanup or things that anyone could do, maybe a system where you can sign up I'll take care of that one and get points through the website that way. And that could kind of increase the competition.
Right, it's like your adopt a hydrant thing, except adopt a pothole.
Right.
How are you going to fix it?
Yeah, you can't do
You can't fix a pothole.
I think someone, but
You can clean your feet. You can have a neighborhood adoption.
there are local businesses that could do
I really like
something
that.
they could earn credit.
I like that. Right, because then it becomes truly a community tool. And right now you're always reporting upwards rather than horizontal. That's a really big insight. Okay. Anything else? Got big ideas? Jeff, back there, I see you. What do you think about Citizens Connect?
I think I largely am always a little skeptical of the smartphone app way of doing things. I'm sure that smart, it's not hot, but I don't know if the package is compatible with other formats and doing that. But I'd be really curious to see if there's a better way to provide SMS capabilities or some sort of physical drop-off alongside. I think the idea of having the playground, like drop, like a common box playground, to me is more compelling than having a smartphone. It's really only the barrier to entry for a smartphone app is much higher than for an SMS. So I think the app is a useful thing for a very small percentage.
There is an SMS version of this. Did you try that?
I didn't play around.
Yeah, because it'll write back to you and say, what do you want to report? And you go through the same thing. I don't have a smartphone, so I have to use the text system.
And a 24-hour hotline, which is where we still get phone. You actually can talk to a live person 95 or something, 98% of the time. So it is.
Interesting. Well,
On the phone topic, I noticed for Miss Trash Collection, if you submit it online, it was required to put in name, address, and everything. But at the bottom it said, if you wanted to just report anonymously, call the hotline. I guess why would that be required through the web?
As I recall, is basically because you will get, if you go through the web, you will get an automatic email about when you need to put where your trash was, to basically prevent folks from totally gaming. And that same vetting process can occur with non-break on the hotline. Okay.
So we've had some big expansive ideas like, why don't we get the data from this so we can do what we want to with it? Why can't the community see what's going on? Why can't we see a timeline of how things are working? These are actually different applications than Citizens Connect. I want to solicit more ideas like that, like something that you were inspired to create because of Citizens Connect. Someone hasn't spoken yet. John, you have it.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I feel like it's really good at connecting citizens to government for small, specific things that government knows how to solve. Yeah. But when it comes to things that if it's not a clear answer, there's not much to do. Like, if St. Oregon keeps being targeted with graffiti, it would be good to have maybe people who are reporting that come together and say, well, why would this some way to actually connect the citizens to report it instead of just
Yeah.
Well, just going off of that, I feel like it almost has this sort of like Foursquare element of it, where like to it, like where like I was actually in Alston, like taking pictures of some graffiti, and I just noticed that there were some other reports like around me of like graffiti, and I thought like, oh, maybe like if I could meet up with those people, or maybe like if I could comment on like their graffiti like report if I saw it. So I guess something where like you can sort of comment on other people's reports, that kind of thing. I think that sort of like platform has a lot of potential.
By the way, Foursquare came out of Dodgeball, which came out of a class just like this one at NYU. So just pick these things up, and then we'll build them, you know. So, okay. Said anything yet, Morgan? What do you think?
I was talking to people. I really like graffiti, and I think so. My only additional idea was to create like a similar app where we could share our graffiti before it got taken down.
Chicago has one right now where you can say, we're the great murals, great citizen murals in Chicago, and take pictures of them, or the great old advertising signs that are still, the ghosts of them left on the sides of buildings. They're beautiful things like that, sort of opportunistically you could find and then reveal to your neighbors. Brittany, do you have any comments?
Well, again, that also made me think about community ashes. Being able to, I mean, I almost thought about turning it on its head and starting to take pictures of places where there isn't any trash, or like there isn't all that stuff to indicate where there's privilege in our city versus none.
Right.
But the other thing, I don't know, and I apologize again, there's an MIT class because they schedule all their Monday classes to Tuesday, so I don't know if anyone said this, but for me, one thing that was weird was noting a damaged sign and then having a status back to saying sign slightly bent but still adequate, and closing basically like it was up for debate. Like I said it was a problem, and that the response back to the city was actually a that, but
it's kind of a diss.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean I wasn't sure how to respond to that, and that was an interesting choice.
Okay, that's interesting.
Along those lines, just a very minor thing. One of the things you can do is sort of star different reports, but that goes to something called favorites. Like, this is my favorite trash.
Yeah.
My favorite.
Maybe for your favorite graffiti.
Yeah.
I know. For you,
like,
right?
I wasn't. So that was a very minor thing, but strange thing.
Yeah, and that doesn't say yet.
So I was on Twitter like this weekend or maybe last weekend. Somebody tweeted me like I have a job and how say, although you should call it not on it, like 30 minutes later, that and yeah, here's the number. Not all cities have a program.
Right.
And the Boston website has doing just a lot of things. A lot of this is very interactive. There's a huge amount of self-serve stuff there, like that is underutilized. So like, a starting point would just be to kind of expand, tile over and say, like, and then more, you can get more elaborate times you could have get rid of that. This seems like to be. I always think about this rather than I come down report crash. These like as the lobby have see rather.
Okay, that's a big true.
I was thinking about the whole feedback thing as well, and it made me wonder whether we could use the platform as a way of getting feedback on particular programs that the city of might be running in neighbourhoods. So, if we're going, for example, I look at this first design brief, and part of it is what technology do people use? Could you use this Citizens Connect platform to either send people out into the field to ask those questions and have them updated, or actually have different ways that people connect with Citizens Connect to actually get them to give feedback to the city about programs or survey them or whatever you need to do to have that be a more proactive report back to the city about programs they might be working on.
Linda.
Along the lines of this what's adequate thing, I was walking around with a friend who lives in Fairfield, for music podcast. We spent a lot of time in VR and I as well. And we were sort of like, oh, I mean, it's sort of sunken, the road's a little sunken, but that's sort of like, from our recent experience, like, that's pretty adequate. So, there are a lot of people from other parts of the world in Boston. So how did you kind of read what expectations are of what you should be or what they would want it to look like, and then they help shape the reports? Because there were a lot of other, and there's still probably a lot of people who are reporting because they don't have these expectations.
Yeah.
I guess it would be good to channel people's energy into something more positive. So, for example, people like Morgan who love graffiti, you could ask them, well, would it be possible for you to participate in a mural project at a school? So basically, redirecting people's energy into something more positive.
Okay. Yeah, Victoria.
Yeah, so I think just drawing on what you're saying about just citizens connecting very much individual to adults.
Right.
I really kind of, like the idea of somehow connecting people with each other. But and I think one of the things is that it's about the place, and it's in a place-based play, even though it's virtual. And so, whether it's like a calendar of events that's being held in the community, like, whether you try to have unique, how when you can have the website where you have this different branding, like, so it's still Citizens Connect, but it's Citizens Connect for Dudley, Citizens Connect for some other suburb inside Boston, but it's the same app, but then the additional add-on functions that we have would be like actual a calendar of events going on in Dudley, community discussion boards, so the Dudley Charter School is having a cake with the there, and you get some volunteers, or those sorts of like
Okay, so we're blowing apart all the walls here. Nigel came in as we were doing this. Any comments?
Sorry.
Just comment, a benediction, a comment. Sorry, I call on people. That's what I do. Yeah.
I would say the comments are all very good, and they definitely touch on a lot of issues that we thought through as we go through what this is and stuff. This has been a fairly successful program for us, and I think as it's gotten, in a hyper-local way, right? So it's not, more strict, but in a city of the size, it's pretty sensitive. So there's been a tendency to want to throw a lot of stuff in there, and so a lot of we try to think through, what is this platform, and how do we, think about the experience of people using it, and make sure that we're, trying to be faithful to the experience, and also trying to push the envelope of this particular platform. So they're all very good.
And a really telling point that Tyler made, I'm not sure you were in the room, that nobody around Dudley was using it.
Right.
So that's sort of adoption and penetration question.
So absolutely. So we are very interested over this year to start. We've had this in great data over the last couple of years, and so we're going to start to keep looking to what does the customer tell us. We don't think that what it's saying is that only people downtown, or people that live downtown or Back Bay or North End are using this site. We do think it's telling us good things about where people are traveling in the city, on the way to and from work. So I think there's a lot of interesting research to be done on digging into that.
Also, there's a real question of folks who use the app versus folks who report things to the city. So again, the app is only 14% of the way in which the city gets any feedback.
And we've seen, as the app is gaining prominence, we've seen numbers going in through all the channels increase. So
that's interesting.
There's something interesting going on.
Brittany, after
Again, sorry to ask, but do you all have any sense of how many like iPhone users or Android smartphone users there are in the city, or do you have that data?
We've asked, but all the center providers don't tell us.
Great. Okay, I'm going to all right. You want to call?
Oh, I was going to make one quick comment.
Yeah, go. Yes, please.
Some quick things on the usability side. So, like, just in general, you guys flagged 3 things that we wrestle with a lot on the usability side. The challenge of sort of full transparency versus legibility. We sort of raised the issue of, I'd love to see all the data on the map. To have, there have been 25,000 reports that have been made through Citizens Connect. To put that within an app will make the app sort of essentially unusable, right? So I mean, you'd want it in another site, but we only basically show the last 100 cases out of a nod to making the app usable and legible. But it does come at a cost of actually showing sort of perhaps more granular stats on what's happening in the neighborhood. Again, a solvable problem. Let me raise the issue about instructions. I think we definitely weigh this tension between an app being intuitive and an app being instructive. And I think the more heavy you go on instruction, the more text you put in there, sort of the more it can actually push people away from sort of diving in and using it. And actually, I forget who raised the comment, but going through the exploration you did of how do I use this app? Oh, let's see what other people are reporting. Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to report things like that. That's actually a really interesting thing. And then this, I mean, Nigel touched on this, there is so many other things that we could be doing with apps like this, but there's this tension between all the problems of the Swiss Army knife app, which does a lot of things poorly and are hard to navigate, and things are single purpose. So on the usability side, there's a bunch of stuff there. All of your guys' ideas around what would motivate folks are all stuff that we are psyched about exploring, and some of those ideas are hoping to be in the 4.0 version of things like leaderboards or cumulative dashboards. We've had conversations with Where and with Coupon, although we probably will not go with either, about the idea of if you report enough things in that particular area, you will get a coupon to a cafe in that area. An interesting idea. And the general notion of how to go from connecting citizens to government to citizens to each other is how we take the Possum story and make that to a platform. It's a huge challenge for us, and I think in some ways, like there aren't that many service types that you could turn over to the public filling a pothole, but there are lots of ways that you could say, hey, 8 people reported graffiti in this neighborhood. If you want to join a listserv about the graffiti neighborhood or be known to your neighborhood organization, here's how you can actually do that. And these are all things that we are excited about developing in the, hopefully the fall release of the.
I have one more thing. So somebody mentioned the digital Possum apps, and I would say that we totally agree. But I think that what we are trying to do is figure out what works well in what context, and to try to explore a bunch of different approaches to casting as wide a net as possible. So I think that any particular app may or may not be successful, but I think what is useful is the process that you go through and trying to improve that app or that experience over a period of time. So whether or not you're building an app that is genuinely trying to take some feedback and change that platform over a period of time, is what we've done. Or if you're doing something like, taking garbage receptacles and engaging in a community process around, user feedback as far as what they imagine their garbage can looking like over a period of time. I think it is a commitment to that kind of collaborative engagement with the community that is what we're doing.
Okay, we're going to take a break here. It's going to be a brief break because John Tolva, who is a colleague of these guys who does this in the city of Chicago, is going to be with us on Google. And so just take like 5 minutes. We're actually going to start after the break with 2 innovations and then go right to John. So break. Be back 5:03. Like really fast.
Yeah.
Oh, there he's on.
So I feel like
There he is.
Yeah.
that might not like the icon.
Oh, look, it's showing the screen, showing the screen, showing the screen.
Hi, we're going to try and give you a picture of the whole class. Alex Ross.
Oh,
Alex Ross. Yeah, yeah.
Alex Howard.
Oh, yeah, no, no, no.
Yeah.
You know, I would love to learn more about it at some point. He's such a mysterious entity. It's like there, but
Yeah.
we don't really know it. But Nika had forwarded a couple of us, I forwarded an email you to them about Alex Ross March 5th, and I wasn't sure if
We
this
got
was
rid of that date.
Got it.
It's not going to come that date. It's
Okay.
calendar change. Okay. April 9th.
Perfect. Okay, and let me know how I can help. Or
Please.
yeah, we like try to figure out. At first, we were like temperature change is a very important muscle. It's a little structure. We decided we need a little more structure. So yeah, so we decided to reduce. So we have
If you be in charge of that event, that would be great.
I would love to. I actually was at social media week this past week. Maria was too, and I went up and down with them.
Great.
Yeah, have a great time.
Great.
Would love to hear specifically what we do because this was a more general audience.
And so this one, I told him this talks about what you need to know to be civil servant.
And I have a very, yeah, exactly. And I have a very selfish, personal, in fact, I want to talk a little more about China and specifically media and technology than the government. So I don't know if that would
Sure,
work.
that's all right. That's
Okay.
too.
All right.
So you happy to do that? So if you can just take the lead.
Sure.
We have him at 2 o'clock tonight. Coordinate with everybody who's got it. Everything goes out. Shorenstein Hall.
No particular preference to format, probably similar to like
Yeah,
the roundtable.
I want to make it as interactive as possible.
Great. And you had mentioned wanting to get MIT Media Lab to go there too. That would be fantastic. Let me know if you want to like connect to them or yeah, I can help.
It's your job. We're going to have our class.
Okay. So that's true. We go there next week. Okay. Second.
Okay, how are we doing? Let's start with Jamal. He's already there. What? Oh. Were they watching the whole thing? Good. I got Jamal there. So take another 2 minutes. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. But I can't see. Oh, right. Innovation. Okay. Give me just 2 more to get back to that. So we have design.
I was looking out for days that was definitely walking along with but once I found it, you are up. That's okay. All right. Is this one right?
Yeah, that's the first one.
Oh. Oh, I need it. I missed that. Sorry.
Should we do this one?
No. Oh, yeah, you can do that one. Okay, fine. Can you switch back? Because I've got other stuff here now. Okay, and I'm happy to click for you. Okay. All right, everybody come back.
Let's go. Find your seats.
Okay, we're going to start with an innovation presentation here by Jamal Jones. Go.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm going to do a presentation about shared services in government. Okay, let's jump right in. Basically, no, go back. Okay. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with cloud computing, but just in case some people don't know what it is, cloud computing basically, well, originally, if you had IT services, you would have to have an individual server. So, for instance, if you had, let's say, the State Department, they have their own server, and they had to put all their information, all their data on their server, and use that to, for applications and whatever type of IT services they needed. Now that we have this thing called cloud computing, different devices and different departments, agencies can share the same service and use what's called a large space of a server, a host server. So the host server has the capacity to buy all these servers in bulk, which basically provides economies of scale, which I'll talk about. Okay. So what are the benefits of this cloud computing? So first of all, economies of scale. Since you can buy all of these servers in one organization and they can share the capacity among different agencies, it significantly diminishes the cost. Also, you can save on electricity because basically you can buy electricity in bulk and you can also buy the hardware in bulk. Also, you can take advantage of automation. Instead of having an IT staff that has to update the software every year, or you have to update your hardware every year, you have this, say for instance like Google, this is an example, they automatically update their equipment, they automatically update Gmail or whatever. So this same type of activity would occur if you had a provider server. It also provides flexibility and mobility. So for instance, if you wanted to work at home, you could do that. Or say for instance, you had to go to a conference and say you work for Boston, you had to go to New York, you can access data. Instead of having to go get the data from your computer in your office, you could just get it from the server, which is allows a lot of flexibility. Also, there's a lot of opportunities for innovation. Since a lot of time and money that IT departments have pretty much spent 80% of their time and money on just maintaining the equipment and maintaining the software. So using virtual systems will basically allow the IT department to have time to do other things. So basically when you call IT and you say, I need you to come work on my computer, they'll have time to do it. And they'll also have time to help you if you want to try to come up with new applications. So this basically just frees up a lot of capacity. Now, you're probably asking, okay, well, why isn't everybody doing this? Here's why. There's natural resistance to change, especially within bureaucracies. So people get used to doing things the way they've been doing it for 10, 20 years. And, you come to them with a new idea and say, we want to try something out. There's a natural resistance to change. Also, there's a lack of capacity in terms of skill level to transition to a new system. So I'm going to address ways to work around that. There's also cost uncertainty because there's a different type of cost structure. People are used to budgeting their IT costs and their IT process of procuring IT equipment and such. This basically makes it an uncertain process. There's also the interagency collaboration. Since you have, say for instance, you want, say Somerville and Cambridge, like the two police departments might want to collaborate. Maybe they don't want to collaborate. Maybe they don't want to work together. I mean, I'm just, I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But there might be some resistance to collaborate and to share information. And there's also the security and the performance. A lot of information that the government has is sensitive and personal. So there's a kind of concern about sharing all this information with a lot of different people. But you can also address that with passwords and with security clearances and things like that. And there's also, you can't see this, but it says downsizing concerns. A lot of people might think, okay, you're bringing in all this new equipment, people can get fired. But since the government is based on budgeting, if you save costs, you actually could save jobs if you actually do save costs in the long run. But
One minute.
Sorry. Okay. Too much.
Yeah.
Critical areas. Governance, communication, program management, technology. I'm going to talk about those. Okay, we go. Okay, so as far as the governance, you want... Go ahead. Right. Okay, so as far as the governance, you want executive sponsorship. So basically, you want the mayor, the governor, the city council, everybody on board. Otherwise, you're going to have issues with getting this implemented. You also want all the plans and policies documented, so you can't go back a year from now and say, well, I thought we were going to do it this way. No, we have documents of how we're going to implement the system. You also want incentives and accountability in the system, and you want a board, a governance board of stakeholders in different departments, different agencies, different levels of management or work levels. As far as communication, and to have this process work, you want to have tailored messages so everybody is on the same page and knows what we're trying to accomplish. You want to have regular meetings, so again, you have that face-to-face time, surveys to provide feedback, and you want the feedback to be ongoing so it's not just a one-time thing. As far as the management, first you want to assess the current operations to see how the system is working now, and you want to formalize the service to determine what you're actually going to provide. And then you want to negotiate what services are going to be shared. So, for instance, are you going to, okay, I'm running out of time. All right.
You're out of time.
Sorry.
You're out of time.
But this is technology. And
all right. Okay. Yay. Okay, fantastic. We're going to go right to John Fallon. So I'll call on you when we're farther along. Sorry about that. He's waiting for us. He's got a tie on, so we've got to make sure that we talk to him. There he is. There's Alex. Hi, Alex. You can raise questions. There. Hey. Alex, our embedded journalist, who's been quiet so far. So we're really lucky to have John Tolva here, who came in as Chicago CTO with Mayor Emanuel, but has a very long history with IBM, working in their Office of Community Developments and Relationships, where he was in charge of innumerable projects that were finding ways to harness people's interests and ability and get them working with communities around the world for IBM. So he comes to this with enormous experience. He's also a DJ. He has this incredible thing going on. You got to check his website. It's ascentedstage.com. Beat Research Chicago, and he's got his latest mixes up there, and it's just great. He's a DJ, always seeking new ways to express what is fundamentally a love of new wave, electro, drum, and bass. But he is currently the Chief Technology Officer of the City of Chicago, and a beloved figure there. And John,
hi.
You've got a captive audience here. Hello. Hi, and we want to hear from you about the challenges you're facing and the excitement that you're experiencing. I know you're doing a lot of speech making these days, but you've got a captive audience of the leaders of tomorrow here at the Harvard Kennedy School who want to hear from you.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to speak to you all. Just a question for Alex real quick. Do you switch your hat based on who's speaking? Because you can put the Cubs hat on now if you want. All right.
Well, as it turns out, I don't know if Susan's class is aware of this, but I actually lived in New England from 1994 until 2009, and during that time, I became a fan of the local ball club, and I thought as long as I was going to come hang out, since pitchers and catchers are headed south, I might as well throw on the cap.
Very good. Okay, well, as Susan mentioned, I came in last May with Mayor Emanuel. I had spent 13 years prior to that at IBM, most recently working in the Smarter Cities group, so was basically deep into the field of analytics and open data, which Mayor Emanuel really got a heavy dose of via Anish Chopra and Vivek Kundra when he was the chief of staff, creating 2 new positions there, the federal CIO and CTO. So in some ways, the position that I have now, which is actually in the mayor's office, and I share with a colleague named Brett Goldstein, who's the chief data officer, owes a lot to President Obama's, sort of original vision that there be a policy level technology representation and cross-agency, cross-department representation at the federal level. I think you can draw a direct line between the establishment of those positions and what we have here. The mayor, got a good dose of data.gov and a lot of the work that was going on at the federal level. And he asked me to come in and kind of talk to his, during the campaign, talk to them about the benefits of open data, which I'll admit at that point, so this was sort of late last year, was primarily around transparency and accountability. You know, building trust or rebuilding trust, as it may be, and you know, getting a significant corpus of information to base process reengineering on. But that's kind of the easy stuff. Where things have moved in the last couple of years is really towards open data for other things, other actionable things like analysis for intervention. You see this in public safety departments and police departments, if you see it at all in the public sector. Taking very big sets of data, using machine learning algorithms because it's so voluminous to identify places for possible intervention. And one of the things that we're doing here is that, except with lots more indicators, not just, you know, the problem with just analyzing crime data to help fight crime is that it's based on sort of a obviously erroneous kind of implicit assumption that crime itself is what causes crime, when we know that it's many other things. Plus, there's all kinds of things that we'd like to prevent in the city, you know, joblessness, blight, foreclosure. And we have block-level data that can go into an analytics platform to help us make decisions. So, you know, if you wanted to characterize what's happening here, it really is about data-informed decision-making, both through, you know, obvious sort of performance metrics, how are we doing cleaning up trash, to much more esoteric things like looking for, you know, patterns or correlations between different parts of how the city works. And to the previous presenter who was talking about shared services and some of the institutional difficulties going between departments, this is at the very nexus of that, right? When there is an action or inaction by one department that has a direct result on something that happens in another. And just before I pause to take a breath, the last one is actually economic development, which I think has been a surprise to a lot of people. Open data to actually build businesses. So there's a guy who is just leaving Civic Commons now, named Nick Grossman, who's done a lot of good thinking around the concept of a civic startup and why the time is so right for something like that. The previous presenter also talked about the difficulties of procurement and doing business with a government. One of the interesting things about open data is that it allows businesses to build up on the periphery of government, right? These vital signs that cities are publishing daily are a resource that permits new applications, new analysis, and in some cases, we've seen at least one here in Chicago, new businesses to grow up, you know, on that periphery. I'll give you one example of that that actually touches all the reasons that I talked about for open data: transparency, accountability, analytics, and economic development. I think this has been as odd a winter in Boston as it has been in Chicago. We've had maybe 3 significant snowfalls. We had a terrible winter last year, as you guys did too. And so in preparation for that, we built a number of applications to sort of help Chicagoans. One of them was called Plow Tracker, which was, or is, a way, if you go to chicagoshovels.org, it's not snowing right now, there's no snow anywhere, so you won't see the plows, but it's a way of plotting where the snow plows are in real time. The very definition of transparency, right? To my mind, this was useful in building trust or sort of disabusing this notion that plows, you know, were given special treatment in certain neighborhoods. Because once you see this, you see a very logical approach to plowing snow. They go to the bridge decks first, they go to the arterials first, and then they turn in. You know, it seemed like we were tracking these plows via GPS anyway. Why not put a front end on it? Well, it turns out that all previous records for website traffic to the city of Chicago were annihilated. People were so interested in looking at this, it was a really good reminder to me that actually open data, just for transparency's sake, is still a very valid reason to do it. You know, forget about the analytics and economic development. There really is still an unslaked thirst for looking into how government works. Well, so what happened with that is that a bunch of people said, yeah, okay, it's great to know where the plows are, but we'd love to see where what streets are clear. So a bunch of civic developers got together, and actually there is no API to this just yet, were intercepting it's called a JSON file, and built something called Clear Streets, which is an app that doesn't show you where the plows are, it shows you where the plows have been. So it looks like a giant Etch-a-Sketch. And they were so successful with this that they decided to actually incorporate and become sort of a company built on open data. So, and then the sort of third piece of this is the real reason we're doing this is so that we can apply analysis to and optimize the routes, right? I mean, even though there are some basic rules that you follow when clearing snow, you can always get better. So, it's an example of publishing data that hits multiple, kind of fronts of usefulness. So I'll pause there. I can sketch Susan a little bit about sort of what we're looking at in 2012 in terms of upcoming stuff, but I'd also like to welcome your questions.
I just want to start off with it. I really appreciate your being here, John, and talking about the ecosystem that you've found and created and nurtured there in Chicago that is such a great place for civic hackers. So talk to us about the elements of that ecosystem. What makes this all work?
I've had a number of conversations with people that ask why have things taken off so rapidly here in Chicago. It isn't because of me. It isn't because of Brett. It has a lot to do. It does have a lot to do with the fact that we have a mandate from the top. There really has not been any problem publishing this data, precisely because the very first thing the mayor said at his very first cabinet meeting to all the commissioners was, you're going to do this. But I think there might be something that's unique about Chicago here, and that is that there was a pent-up desire for the ability to build on top of city data that lasted a very long time, decades even. And so once the floodgates were open, people sort of rushed at it. It's basically you're saving all this up, and it comes out. I have no way of proving that, right? It was not a slow burn that took off in the flame. It was an explosion, and I suspect that because there were many open gov groups that just didn't have a heck of a lot to do, because though there was a data portal, there wasn't anything in it. So we really do have a vibrant ecosystem here. I want to talk just briefly about ecosystem because it bears on Boston specifically. Another part of Chicago Shovels is we took an application that was developed by Code for America with Nigel in Boston. They were there for a totally separate project, but I think they arrived, Nigel, correct me if I'm wrong, right when a huge blizzard there last year, and built Adopt a Hydrant, which you may know about. Beautiful piece of code, actually very elegant. The word hydrant is in it one time, makes it quite reusable. We took that code and created Adopt a Sidewalk. So in Chicago, you're required by ordinance to clear your own sidewalk, and yet the number one call that comes into 311 during a snowstorm is, why aren't you out here clearing my sidewalk, city, or my alley, or something like this? So in an attempt to kind of promote the neighborliness that we actually legitimately saw during the blizzard last year, people helping one another out, and also to give people a mechanism for asking for help where they legitimately can't do their sidewalk, and also then to kind of capitalize on community sharing. You've seen these sites kind of sprouting up, kind of block level, I've got a drill to loan or I've got a shovel to loan. We modified the code. It's a significantly more complex piece than Adopt a Hydrant, which was basically based on points. Not to mention that we didn't have a map of the sidewalks. But Susan, just the point is that I believe, I think I speak for Nigel in saying that one of the future paths forward for cities is the sharing of not just data, but application source code, right? So that's back in GitHub. Anybody can take that code and do other things with it, as is our Plow Tracker application. And we're all solving the same problems in the big cities, not to mention that the medium-sized cities in the world are where some of the real innovations coming, just because of the scale of their city permits them a nimbleness sometimes that we don't have. So the ecosystem is about civic-minded volunteers in the community as much as it is about sharing with my peers in other cities.
I know we've got lots of people here who want to ask questions and talk to you. So who goes first? Come on, guys. Yeah, Anand.
When you were talking about database decision making, it was really exciting, and one of the things that came to mind was CityStat and CompStat.
Yeah.
The advent of that and how a huge part of the success of those programs wasn't so much the availability of data, but the integration of online or offline. So like having a room and a meeting and a public broadcast of that. So I think conceptually the like freeing data and opening up apps to developers makes sense to me, but I'm curious how you're managing the people side of it. Do you need to be in a room with the people who are using your data? Do they want you there? How does that part work out?
Yeah, so CityStat's a good example of, I think the real success of CityStat was the organizational rigor that came with it. Our chief of police, formerly of the NYPD, was Gary McCarthy, was there at the beginning of CityStat, and the fact that you've got all the division commanders, in the room every week, poring over what is essentially performance data, basically, rather than sort of predictive analytics, is a great model for how you make the kind of stuff that we're looking at actionable. I think a couple things there. One was the mayor's understanding that a chief data officer and my role sort of had to be in the mayor's office rather than in an agency. So, we're at the table when we're actually part of the policy team, believe it or not. I mean, just as a blob on the organizational chart. So that policy matters are always discussed in terms of what's quantifiable and what isn't. But if I was going to characterize 2012 in one way in terms of open data, it's that we've been fairly successful pushing the publication of data down to the departments and agencies, operationalizing it, making it part of just standard procedure. I certainly don't want to be, on the phone weekly, for the rest of my time here, reminding commissioners to update the data portal. They kind of get that now. Our real issue is, when I say data-informed decision-making, it's not just the mayor, right? It's community groups. It's aldermen. It's people sort of out and about that can use this to do something. And we recognize that there's still a gaping void between, 3 million rows of crime data and being able to do anything with that if you're not, some sort of, savant statistician. So what we're really focused on right now is building tools and building the sort of API hooks that can allow others to do that too. Put it in one word, it's actually moving this stuff to a more actionable corpus. I've been on, I guess what you'd call in these circles, a listening tour with some of our community groups who are, fairly stymied as to how this stuff can be used. And we've been running, tutorials and things like that. But I really think the focus on app development isn't because it's shiny and leads to competitions and that sort of thing. It's really more, how do we make this data usable?
Let's follow up on that. That was a great question. Yeah, Oscar.
I am curious to learn more about your work with EveryBlock.
Stand up.
I'm curious to learn more about your work with EveryBlock. You had a reading about the kind of innovators you've been working with. And it said that there's this platform that you work with that basically engages local communities and has kind of a shared dashboard for media updates, for a shared community calendar, which earlier in the class we discussed about having one center for communities to engage. I looked up every block in Boston and put in the zip code for the community we're working in, and it only had about 2 users in the specific neighborhood where we're working. So I'm curious to see if the ways you engage specific communities, because it seems like there are great platforms out there, Citizens Connect, but the users are concentrated in not necessarily the areas that have the most need.
Yeah. So just coincidentally, after this video conference, I'm heading up to the EveryBlock offices. They were founded here by a guy named Adrian Hullavati, who was just scraping Chicago crime data. And that kind of, just as a side note, that kind of hyper-local focus on data is really kind of an inspiration for what we do here. Dan O'Neill, who was part of EveryBlock, is now the head of something called the Smart Chicago Collaborative, which is a funding collaborative that really permits the city to do a lot of technology work that we wouldn't otherwise been able to do. So EveryBlock is sort of in our blood here. But the problem you're describing, which is a form of digital divide, but I'll characterize as digital literacy, engaging the community, or even just raising awareness that these resources exist in the communities where they really need to exist, is part of this push in 2012 sort of outside of the office I'm sitting in now to help people learn. So one of the most, so we got an ARA grant a couple years ago, the stimulus grant, for the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program. So that's a broadband grant that isn't broadband. It's basically for teaching people, what the benefits of this, and what that has translated into are classes in communities for, not just how to use the internet, but why does it actually matter, what can you do? And the most popular class, bar none, lines out the door, is Civic. It's called Civics 2.0, and it is this, right? So how do you interact with the government, from a computer, basically? And people seem to love that. That's one mechanism for getting out there. This does shade into another kind of focus area for 2012, which is thinking of the digital touch points with the city as not being a computer. The actual smartphone penetration on the south and west sides of Chicago, which are, basically our underserved areas, is actually off the charts. Now, it's troubling in one way in that this, for many people, is broadband. And we know that it is very much not broadband, both from a speed perspective, but also that it is, basically a monopoly of 3 carriers. And yet, it is internet. We conceive of the built environment itself, the city itself that people move around in, as being ripe for points of tangency with city government digitally. So I'll give you some examples. Obviously, there's smartphones. But there's a lot of networked public objects in the public way. I mean, thousands. We've got 4,500 parking meters that are networked computers. They're not used to do anything but take your credit card right now. But in my mind, coming from a sort of nerd's perspective, that's an IP address that is not being capitalized on, and it's in the street. We've got, interactive touchscreens on our L platforms. We've got them coming to our multi-touch, I might add, coming to our bus shelters. We've got solar compactors in the public way that have IP addresses. This is how we know that they're full. My point here is that in really raising the level of digital literacy, I think we have to stop thinking about the only point of interaction being a computer at a desk. There are all kinds of ways of building out a platform, like the data portal is a platform, but now think of the street itself having the ability to sort of interact, whether it's via screen or near-field communication or just SMS. One of the most elegant apps we have is the ability to text a short code that's on a bus sign, and it tells you when the bus is coming. It's not a smartphone app. It's nothing. It's literally very low tech. Just you're querying that object, which is the bus sign. So this is pretty far afield from your original question, but I think that engaging people in the community, finding more than 2 users, also encountering them where they are, and they're not always in front of a desk.
That was a great question. Other ways of interacting. Anything else here? I know you guys have more to say. Yes, John.
Hi, John. My name's John Brackett. I'm from Chicago, so seeing this happen really warms my heart. And I got to see you here when you were here last year, which I also enjoyed. But the question I want to ask is related to transparency. We spent a lot of time in another class of mine looking at data.gov and kind of came to the conclusion that having all this information available didn't necessarily lead to more people using it to reduce or otherwise discourage corruption. So when I heard about this possibility in Chicago, I was really excited, but also realized it's not entirely consistent with my experience with the city that corruption would be on a rapid decline. So I'm kind of curious if you have plans on that end, or what can be done to make that data in the data portal more useful in practice.
Yeah, it's a tricky question. This came up a lot with Cloud Tracker. For a very long time in Chicago, it was thought that where the clouds went, ward by ward, because it was controlled centrally, had to do with how you were, what side you currently were on with the mayor. I wasn't with the city. I don't know if that happened or not. But we now have it. Now that data is public. So the question is, how would we prove or disprove, whether that kind of favoritism was prevented? by having it out there. I like having the check in place, right? I mean, maybe someone was considering doing that, a ward boss or something like that. And if they do, you know, it will be found. I have utter confidence in the you know, sort of crowdsourced approach to this, that it will be found. I will say one thing though, especially with Alex on the line here. About midway through this deluge of data that we were putting out, this was right after we released 10 years of crime data. I got a bunch of calls from reporters saying, you know, thank you very much, we've been asking for this for years, it's wonderful, blah, blah, blah. And also, can you point us to where the good stuff is? And, you know, that was kind of shocking. One, that assumes that I actually read through 3 million rows of data, which I obviously didn't. But the other thing is, you know, to me, that is journalism in the 21st century. You know, I've got a lot of sympathy for the community groups that, you know, don't know what the hell I'm talking about when I go talk about data. I don't so much for journalists. Alex is absolutely an outlier in that regard, or on the vanguard. Wow. Did I get off on a screed there? Where was I headed with that?
Corruption data, yes or no?
One of my guiding principles in this is something I thought was very insightful from the mayor. He said, well, there's two ways to deal with bad information, right? One is to withhold it, or you know, not put it out there, try to massage the message, you know. The other is to put it out there and with enough context that, you know, you trust that people will understand and make decisions from that. So basically, his quote was, you know, let's not bury the bad news in secrecy. And in some ways, that's what you're doing when you're putting that, you know, those plows out there. There will be a news story that's written about a plow that was stopped for 2 hours when it shouldn't have been. You know, I guarantee you that will happen. And that's okay. That story is okay, because we can use that to optimize and make changes. It's better than letting it sort of simmer in people's minds that, you know, they have no idea where the plows are going, so, you know, we'll just assume that they're asleep. You know, it's just two different ways of dealing with, I suppose you could say, reality. One big thing, and not to keep going back to Plow Tracker because there are other interesting projects, but a huge part of the importance of that site is a little narrative blurb that's above the map that actually explains what you're looking at. Because if you just took a quick snapshot of it, say right as the snow started, you'd see a bunch of trucks bunched together at the garages, but you wouldn't know they were garages. And if you were you know, if you really wanted to, you know, stick it to the city, you could say, look at these 4 wards, they've got all the trucks. Well, yes, they do, because that's where the trucks park. So you've got to give it context. I'm constantly go back and forth with you know, folks who say, well, just give us the data and we'll make sense of it. And I very much appreciate that, but you know, it's like taking the vital signs of the body and not knowing what they sum to. You know, what it actually means that your blood oxygen level is whatever it is. You need more context than that.
So how do you prioritize which data sets to release? This was a big problem for data.gov. Have you found a way to get over that problem?
You know, at first, to the credit of the prior administration, actually, they had a ton of open array, you know, cleaned, tagged. It just hadn't been let out. So really, it was just kind of a floodgate at first. But I will say, a really valid piece of criticism that we received early on was that the process of making these things transparent was not transparent.
Yeah.
And that is largely because we had no process in the first 90 days, let's say, getting it out there. But so two things came together. That criticism, which I found to be very valid, and then also this sense, even from people who were kind of data wonks, saying you need some sort of, you know, sort of narrative around this. Like, what are we actually looking at? So what we have on the portal now, and actually also at cityofchicago.org, is kind of an open conversation about what we should do next. You know what I mean? Some of it is tied to policy announcements. You know, so there is that. I'm trying to think of a recent example of that. Yeah, was it 2 weeks ago we released city employee reimbursements. So basically what people are getting paid for relocations and that sort of stuff. And that was joined with an announcement about sort of overhauling how reimbursements are done, that kind of stuff. But now it's you know, largely aligned to public feedback, sort of policy directions, And then, like I said, a lot of it's just become standard operating procedure, and it's just being updated nightly or weekly.
Something we haven't talked about so much yet today or in prior classes is participation in policymaking by citizens.
Mm-hmm.
How neighborhoods can plan their own future, how they can interact with what the city's plans are. What are your great success stories or lessons for this class on that topic?
Yeah. So ChicagoBudget.org, so at the end of last year when we were in, basically the whole city is talking about the budget for 2020, we had over 8,000 submissions for ideas. And every single one of those were sort of sent off to commissioners or whoever the subject matter expert was in the city for response. And the mayor himself called a couple dozen people, just picked up the phone and called them, and quite a few of those ideas made it in. So another aspect here is there's a social media director in the mayor's office, which may not seem like all that much to you guys in that classroom, but it's a bit of a big deal here. And it's two-way, too. I like to stress that many governments use social media really just more to get the message out. But this is definitely a two-way thing. That's been very successful. I'll tell you about another one, which actually isn't the city's doing so much. One of the winners, or the winner of the placemaking category for apps for Metro Chicago, which was our competition last year, was called Mi Parque. And it's an Android app in Spanish that actually creates kind of a virtual town hall for a really underserved community here called Little Village that has the lowest amount of green space of any community in the city. And basically they were saying, we need a way, other than the once quarterly town halls to express our needs and our desires for this park. And that's been open sourced, and we are working with other community groups to rework that as a kind of feedback mechanism for other community projects. We've got something here called the Bloomingdale Trail, which is kind of Chicago's answer to the High Line. It's significantly different, but interesting in that it crosses multiple neighborhoods, and having an app-based way of community feedback in the design process is going to be key. And just like Adopt a Sidewalk and Adopt a Hydrant, it's built off of what came before.
So we're going to let you go in maybe another 5 minutes, but I wanted to give you I want you to talk about how interesting it is that we've got Chris and Dana and Nigel and you and this distinct generation of leaders in tech and government in the United States. Play a few bars, sing a little bit about that. It's pretty significant, and it's a big generational change right now.
Yeah, and I would say the generation is probably the only thing I have in common with the people you listed off. I don't put myself at the rarefied stratum of those guys, but and that's a compliment, Nigel.
We got it.
One of the things is just simple demographics. I forget what the stat is. Alex, you might remember. Nick quotes it all the time. There's a lot of old people in government. Like distressingly so in terms of where we're going to be in 10 years when they hit retirement age. So in part, it has to be this way, or there's going to be nobody working in government. But the other thing, the reason civic developers, or let me just say this, the reason developers like working on government data, I think, is that most of them aren't particularly civic-minded, or politically minded. They just see this as a really hard problem, right? It's like a really juicy problem set, if you want to think about it that way. And, that's how we encourage people to help. We've got a couple different crews of volunteers that come in here every week helping us with really arcane stuff that, if you step back just a little bit, has nothing to do with government. It's about like the complex system that is a city, and help us build a spatial database for that or whatnot. So I think part of it is a brand statement. What is the job of running a city? How do you make that really interesting? Well, you break it down, as what appeals to that type of mind. It is a very complex system that has, so there are nonlinear consequences, let's say, from an action and a consequence. And, so if you're talking to a bunch of data nerds or developers, this is interesting. right? This entices them. It's a good time. It's a good time to be in government. I wasn't looking for it. I was perfectly happy at IBM, but to your point about what it's like to be in this group, my calculus ended up being very simple. It was, could I do my job at IBM with the conviction that I had previously done it if I turned down an opportunity to actually do what I've been telling people around the world to do for 3 years? And I decided no. And it's a lot of fun. I got to say, I have no regrets.
That's so cool. Chris, Nigel, want to say hi? Say
How's it going, John?
Hi.
We love John. I think John is... So,
Alex, Nigel, just whatever you were going to say, keep saying.
I was going to say that John is, I don't know, sort of being self-deprecating.
Yeah.
He's definitely considered, obviously, one of the leading lights in this area. In the perspective, one of the interesting things I think about some of the people in this space is that we all have a slightly different perspective. So the way that he and Brett think about the space is a little bit different than the way that we do here in Boston. But I think that adds a ton to the quality and sort of the kinds of things that get brought to the table. So every time that we get to spend time with each other, it's just an incredible time because we have all these different things that we're saying. Sometimes we don't even understand what we're saying to each other.
Right, but you're smiling.
After a beer or so. Yeah.
So Alex, embedded journalist, what's up? He's muted. We're going to turn him on. Alex. Oh, don't block him. Oh.
Hey, Alex, if you can hear us, I think you're on mute.
Alex, go out and come back in again. We're sorry. There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. So the stat from Nick Grossman, and Jen Palka cites it too, was that in the 70s you had 13% of municipal employees over the age of 40. That's now reversed. 13% of municipal employees are under the age of 40 now. And the city of San Francisco estimated that 60% of municipal employees will be eligible to retire in the next 5 years. So there's about to be a generational shift, but it's important to put that in context with interest. I think there was a study of college graduates or about to be college graduates, and I think less than 6% said they had any interest in serving in government. So the context for what John said and the transition he himself has gone through, I think is very important here. There's this dynamic that we've seen here in DC with a couple of people who've gone on to be entrepreneurs in residence, and in a couple other cities around the country where some of their citizens have come back to work at them. And I think John is absolutely right on the crest of that wave. The question I think a lot of people are asking is, to what extent is his experience going to be a model for other people? There are going to be a lot of freshly minted millionaires coming out of the Facebook IPO, for instance. Will any of those young people want to go serve in government? There's going to be, I think, a need for that in the context of the specific skill set that John referenced in terms of drawing insight from vast amounts of data, from big data, right? And that is not something that necessarily is going to the old systems integrator or IT person skill set. It's to someone who can work with the modern tools of data science, so to speak, which we talk a lot about at O'Reilly. And I think I just want to, just before I kind of hop off and go back to listening, just to point out to the class, and I think to anyone who's tuned in, that what John is doing as a Chicago CTO and what Brett Goldstein is doing as the CDO, the Chief Data Officer, really are redefining public service in the 21st century. They've taken positions that didn't exist before. They're exploring the possibilities, and this is critical. They're operationalizing it so that it gets into the glue of the city itself. Now, if you follow the progress of government to government, from city government to one administration to the next, you know that a lot of times whatever the previous administration does will get ripped up. But if you can figure out a way to bake it into the governance systems, right, to the way that the city thinks, you can change something in a structural way. And that's deeply exciting. And the reason it's exciting to see John and Brett doing it in this context is because the discussion around open data for the past several years has often been all about the apps. Now there's good reasons for that because it's a way of getting people excited, getting people aware of it. But the challenge is that unless those applications lead to direct value for the citizens or for people working in the city, or both, then they may have gotten people to know about it, the data, but then once the apps are built and people don't use them, there's a real issue with a fall-off afterwards. We see that in city after city. When he talks about it in terms of helping the city operate more efficiently, doing better data-driven decision-making across the board, not just at from the mayor's office, but down to aldermen and the city level, talks about giving people access to that kind of information to use it as the raw material to build businesses from. That example is something that people in cities all around the world can see. And it gives open data advocates actual evidence, that whole data thing, to go and make much better results-oriented and return on investment-oriented pitches to their own mayors. And it's pretty straightforward. If you can convince Mayor Emanuel of something, they figure they've probably got a shot in their own cities.
Well, thanks, Alex. And John, as the institutionalized revolutionary changing the face of government there in Chicago, do you have any last words of advice for this class?
Well, I guess the only thing harder than convincing a mayor to kind of embrace this, the next frontier, I think, is venture capital. We've got a new 50,000-foot sort of incubator co-working space that's opening up just across the river here. And we'll have 2 seats there, 2 desks for civic startups, specifically for, civic-focused startups. And that's fine. The seats are the easy part. It's actually convincing venture funds that, A, this is something slightly different than a social venture. It's related, but it's different. If I'm a high-flying venture capitalist, the last thing I'm thinking about is something that has to do with government. So I think that's the next frontier. Any tips would be very welcome. We'll be starting that in the spring.
That's great. John, we treasured having you with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the invitation.
Everybody? Yeah, great. Thank you. We have one more, and John, we're just delighted that you also watched the end of the last hour. That was fantastic. We know you have a job to do. We hope you hang on because students are now going to talk about something exciting they've discovered they're going to teach the class about.
Sure.
Right? Who's going? Move. Come on. Okay. I'm sure it's exciting. It's in the presentation. No, it's in the big one. This one? Yeah. There's a link.
So while they're pulling the presentation up, Lou and I are here today to talk to you about the Virtual Student Foreign Service, a program initiated by the State Department.
No, that's the wrong one. You have to go to the presentation 5. That one is. Yeah, and scroll down. There's a link. That one. Click on the link. We have to actually copy the link because now you put it in this on screen. Sorry. Copy the link. Copy the link. Copy the link. Put it over here. How frustrating. No, don't worry. Are we going to lose the Hangout? That's my question.
No. Open and yeah.
I tried. I did Control T. Just put the link in. It's ready. It's in there. There we go. All right.
So let me just check to make sure that.
Yeah, this is it. That one. Okay. There we go.
More. We
learned this. Full screen.
Okay. So this initial program, we're going to refer to as CSFS from now on, was initiated in 2009 by Secretary Hillary Clinton as a way to basically harness technology and then to get more young Americans, by young I mean college and graduate students, to be involved in diplomacy. We'll talk more about the details later on. Wait, that's not what it's supposed to do.
Okay,
One
so
side.
right back up there.
So this program is administered by the Office of E-Diplomacy, as well as consulates, U.S. consulates and embassy abroad, as well as a couple of U.S. State Department domestic offices. And what's make some of the components that make this program interesting?
There we go.
Well, okay, what problem does it attempt to solve? Well, as many of you might know, it's really hard to get an internship at the State Department, mostly because for unpaid internships, you have to fund the trip yourself, or you have to get your school to give you the funding. And also, for the paid internships, the State Department doesn't have too many of those, so it's extremely competitive to get that. Mostly only graduate students get those paid internships. So, wait, no, not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
And so one way to solve this is with this program, where it's basically just an e-internship. So you're doing the internship virtually, from wherever you are. So it doesn't require traveling, it doesn't require visas, anything like that. And also the security clearance process. If you're a real intern at the State Department, you have to go through an extremely long clearance process. You apply in September, and you get the results in like December, but then you might have to wait all the way until June to find out whether or not you're cleared to work for the State Department. But this program, with this program, you don't have to go through any of that. So it's one additional barrier that you can overcome with this program. So some details about this program. Essentially, the way it works is sort of like the same as the regular State Department internship. So they would, send out the announcement on Facebook and some other methods. And once you know about the program, you would apply through the normal internship process, where you write an essay, you send in your transcript, and then you send it off to the State Department, which would review and see which posts abroad or which offices within the State Department would be available to accept you, or if they have jobs for you to do. And then they would match the student and that office or that consulate up, and then the rest will be taken care of by that office. So that's the traditional internship program. With this e-internship program, what you do is you would apply through the same process, but you would only need to commit to work 5 to 10 hours a week, and you can work from anywhere. And most of the projects are internet-based projects or technology-based. And it would also give you an experience of what it's like to be in the U.S. Foreign Service. So there's some jobs that would require minimal language ability. And I guess I think why it's interesting is it's low time commitment. So in addition to doing some other things that you might have to do, you can also do this internship at the same time. And it doesn't require a lot of money. And also, if you can go to that slide, next one. Right now, there's research showing that for young students, e-internship is the trend. So basically, because of the lack of time available, we're all interested in doing wonderful things, but we have to do it virtually. So that's a quote from some of the research. So did it work? It's kind of hard to say because the program's only been around for 2 years, since 2009. I actually participated during the first year, where it was been very competitive. They were just like begging for people to join the program. So anyone could join. And I was assigned to a consulate in China, and the person who was assigned to work with me, he was extremely disorganized. I was told that, oh, help us with the website. But other than that, I wasn't given very explicit instruction of what to do. But right now, from the Facebook group, I found out that it's actually very competitive. This past year, they only had 146 spots for over 1,000 applicants. And some of the work that they've done is extremely interesting. So projects such as creating, surveying social media efforts of the different consulates and embassy abroad, and then making suggestions on how they can capitalize on these best practices. Or, having web seminars where American students could have a chat about their lives with their counterparts, abroad. Or doing research on social media or media coverage of a specific topic. So it's very high value, I would say, but it's very low in terms of the time commitment. And I also think it's interesting because it's a way for the U.S. to spread soft power without the use of, you don't need a huge budget to do that. And I also think that this would serve as a very good program to people who might be interested in joining the U.S. Foreign Service and becoming a diplomat, because it gives them a taste of what life would be like if they were to become a diplomat. And I also thought it might be interesting to explore if this is only a program that would work only in the U.S. context. So I asked Moo, my partner, who's from South Korea, if it would work in South Korea.
Go next. So we thought about how this program might be applicable to the South Korea. And South Korea already have a high-speed internet infrastructure and also experiencing high unemployment rates, but there's not enough opportunity internship for the students. And there's a culture for considering the diplomacy as a kind of prestigious job. So as long as the government can hold can foster the conversation between the student demand and the government's internship, then it is totally successful in Korea.
So are you going to suggest it?
Absolutely.
All right. Then we always need practice. Okay.
Any questions?
Any questions? All right. Another platform that could be generalizable to all kinds of situations. All right. Thank you very much. Update on the group situation?
Yeah.
Last word on this?
You have in your inbox an email from me with another Google Doc, allowing you to express your preferences about what you like. We'll do our best to match people to their first or second. No promises, but we'll do our best.
And these are the 5 groups. The charter school communications tool is in the email as an attachment, but was not in the physical handout, so don't be confused by that. Anything else? Here's the next assignment for next week. Get together with your group and figure out what sort of person would it be most helpful for you to talk to, what specifically are you interested in finding out from Dudley, what do you want to ask them about, and then email that to me and Kate by 4 o'clock on Monday. All right? All right, thank you all. This is an engaging class.
Did everybody sign the attendance sheet?
Inside, I think so. It's over here.
No, it's good.
You drew pictures of each other. What's this? They sketch.
That was their
That's very cute.
Okay, bye, folks.
Yeah.